What if I told you that the Cleveland Browns didn't just make a mistake in the draft? They made the single most embarrassing and costly decision in franchise history on purpose? Because what just leaked from the Browns' practice facility isn't just surprising, it's devastating. It confirms the conspiracy fans have been whispering about for months. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just better than Dillon Gabriel in camp, he was miles ahead, outperforming him, outworking him, outclassing him. But the Browns ignored it. The media covered it up. And now, the cover-up is collapsing for everyone to see. This isn't just a quarterback controversy. This is a full-blown narrative war that ripped through the league. Careers are on the line. Reputations are in shambles. The game tape is being ignored, and trust me, that's no accident. Because if the footage proves Shedeur was the answer all along, then that raises one terrifying question. Who decided to bury him? And why? Buckle up, because what I'm about to show you didn't just ruin a season. It might have exposed the biggest media manipulation the NFL has seen in years. It all started with a leak. Not a rumor, not a hot take. A real, raw, unedited clip of Browns practice accidentally posted, silently deleted, but downloaded fast enough to go viral in private circles. What it showed? It shattered the Browns' quarterback narrative in seconds. In the footage, Shedeur Sanders quiet, focused, working the field like an NFL veteran was dropping absolute dimes. Precise timing, tight windows, command of the huddle. One rep after another showed poise, processing speed, and leadership you'd expect from a 10-year pro, not a rookie fighting for a backup spot. But what pushed this from impressive to insane was the side-by-side comparison with Dillon Gabriel. And comparison might be too generous. Gabriel, the guy the Browns actually drafted to start, looked uncomfortable in the pocket, missed simple throws, and repeatedly made poor reads. The contrast was so bad, so undeniably obvious, that fans who saw the clip said it looked like a college player trying to hang in an NFL camp and failing. In one frame, Shedeur hits a tight slant between double coverage off his back foot. Clean, confident. The very next sequence shows Gabriel overthrowing a basic out route so badly the receiver didn't even make a play. And according to someone inside the building who has since come forward anonymously, the footage wasn't even cherry-picked. That was a normal day, one of many. The exact words? That's just what practice looked like every damn day, and everyone in that locker room knew it. Let that sink in. The Browns organization had eyes on Shedeur every day. They watched him outperform the guy they gave the job to. And they still made the same decision. They still backed Gabriel. They still buried Shedeur on the depth chart and eventually off the roster altogether. The leak didn't just expose player performance, it exposed the entire franchise's credibility. Because these weren't just practice reps, these were reps that should have changed the course of their season. Instead, they were dismissed, ignored, or worse, intentionally covered up by people with power. And it begs the question, if you could see the difference in 30 seconds of footage, what were the coaches watching? And what were they being told to pretend they didn't see? Here's where things get deeper. Because the source who confirmed the footage said this as well. Players knew, coaches knew, people upstairs, they knew too. There was talk behind the scenes about Shedeur having the it factor, but they already had the pick in. They rolled with Gabriel and they weren't willing to admit they messed up. Translation? They chose their egos over their future. They chose narrative over talent. And for Shedeur, that decision didn't just affect one career, it may have knocked him out of an opportunity to start in the NFL from day one. Because when a team buries you this hard with local media doing their part to spin excuses, most other teams back off. It's a ripple effect, and that's exactly what insiders are now saying happened. But the fans? They didn't fall for it. Not this time. The leak set off alarms across fan forums and Reddit threads. Fans were saying what media outlets wouldn't. Practices don't lie. Gabriel was a reach. Sanders was the real deal. And now, with the Browns' offense among the worst in the league, every snap Dillon Gabriel takes has become a living reminder of what could have been. But maybe the most telling part? Where the leak came from? Several sources say it wasn't an accident. Not even close. The practice footage wasn't posted by some clueless intern. It allegedly came from a frustrated assistant coach, someone who had seen enough, someone who wanted people outside the building to know what really went down. They couldn't say it out loud, but they could show it. Think about that. You've got grown adults inside an NFL franchise leaking footage to expose their own team's decision-making. That's how dysfunction spreads. That's when the cracks stop being manageable and start becoming structural. This wasn't a case of fans speculating. This was a direct blow to the Browns' public narrative, and they haven't denied its authenticity once. Why? Because they can't. The footage is real. The timing is damning. And the silence? That says everything. But here's where it gets even more twisted. Because shredding Shedeur's public image, that started long before the season ever did. Before the Browns passed on Shedeur Sanders, before Dillon Gabriel stepped onto an NFL field, before the viral footage blew the entire narrative wide open, there were already signs that something deeply wrong was happening behind the scenes. This didn't begin on draft night. It started months earlier with a slow, calculated character assassination. From the moment Sanders declared for the draft, the media in Cleveland and beyond pounced. Suddenly, respected analysts were dropping hints about maturity issues. Radio hosts questioned if he had the temperament to lead grown men. Outlets ran stories nitpicking his confidence, his wardrobe, his social media habits, anything but his actual football skills. Then came the speeding ticket. A simple traffic violation turned into a week-long feeding frenzy. Local outlets ran back-to-back segments speculating about his recklessness and decision-making. National voices weighed in like it was a red flag on par with a felony arrest. Clickbait thumbnails, flashing sirens, headlines like "Major Character Concern" were splattered everywhere. You'd think he'd been arrested. But here's the truth. He was going 15 over the speed limit. Not drag racing. Not under the influence. Not caught doing anything even remotely criminal. Now compare that to what happened just 2 weeks later, when Myles Garrett, the Browns' highest paid player, their captain, their face of the franchise, got tagged for speeding twice as bad, literally over 100 miles per hour. How did the media react? Crickets. Barely a whisper. No concerns. No Twitter outrage. The story vanished within hours. Why the difference? Both players caught speeding, both under the microscope. But only one of them became a media target. And if you're still thinking this was coincidence or overreaction, think again. Because when you step back and look at the timeline, the agenda becomes impossible to ignore. Over a 6-week window leading up to the draft, Cleveland sports outlets published over a dozen negative opinion pieces centered around Sanders, questioning his leadership, doubting his coachability, raising red flags. All while Dillon Gabriel was getting glowing sleeper coverage and rising star hype. Think that happened organically? Think again. Insiders now claim that certain media figures were being fed talking points from voices within the Browns front office. Whisper campaigns designed to justify a decision they had already made to pass on Shedeur, to write him off. They just needed a reason. Or more importantly, they needed you to believe they had one. It didn't matter that Shedeur had more experience in a pro-style offense than most top prospects. It didn't matter that, statistically, he had the highest completion percentage under pressure in Division I football. It didn't matter that he was a film rat with first-in, last-out habits. Nope. The narrative had to shift, because the real issue wasn't how he played football, it was how he carried himself. Confident, charismatic, direct. He spoke with clarity and pride, not shyness. He didn't downplay who he was, or who his father was. And in some corners of old-school sports media, that's still seen as a threat. The code words came fast. Cocky, flashy, needs to learn humility. These are the same tired dog whistles that have followed outspoken black athletes for decades. And whether they'll admit it or not, they were used strategically to rebrand Sanders as a distraction rather than a generational leader. And it worked. For a while. Decision-makers inside the Browns were able to point to this media firestorm as justification. They could say, "We've got concerns." They could look reasonable, but it was all manufactured. And here's the kicker. Some of the same analysts tearing down Sanders in March were the same voices hyping him 6 months earlier. Why? Because the shift wasn't about football. It was about narrative control. It was about making the decision to pass on Shedeur look logical, even noble. It was about protecting insiders from fan backlash before it could come. But here's the thing. You can't rewrite tape. Shedeur's game film speaks for itself. Accurate, calm under pressure, elite touch on deep balls, leadership that rallied his entire locker room. And still, that wasn't enough to silence the noise. Now with Gabriel falling apart on national television, the smoke is finally clearing. And once again, the truth is revealing something a lot of people didn't want you to see. So ask yourself this: what happens when a team lets bias win over performance? What happens when the media becomes a shield for bad decision-making? Because while they were busy dragging Shedeur in the headlines, he was doing something completely different behind the scenes. By now, we've seen the footage, we've followed the media hit pieces, and we've watched Dillon Gabriel burn every opportunity into ash. But there's still a deeper question here, one nobody in the mainstream dares to ask. Why was Shedeur Sanders so threatening to begin with? Why was the coverage so relentless? The narrative so controlled? The smear campaign so coordinated? Because make no mistake, it wasn't just about football. It was about power. Shedeur isn't your typical rookie quarterback. He's not walking into the league begging for approval, waiting for someone to hand him a script to follow. He came in fully formed, not just as a quarterback, but as a brand, a leader, and a voice. And that alone? That scares people. Because Shedeur Sanders doesn't come from obscurity. He's the son of Dillon Sanders, a Hall of Famer, a cultural icon, and arguably the most unapologetic, influential figure in modern football. Dillon doesn't play nice with traditional media. He builds his own platforms, controls his own message, defends his players with zero hesitation, and he never asks permission. Now tell me, how does that sit with the good old boys in NFL front offices who are used to controlling every detail of a rookie's image? Not well. Not well at all. And if they can't control the father, guess what? They sure as hell don't want to deal with the son. Let's get real. Shedeur carries himself with the same traits they celebrate in other QBs: swag, confidence, leadership, vision, but when he does it, suddenly it's labeled as immaturity or ego. Why? Because he's not trying to fit their prefab mold. He doesn't smile politely and say, "I'm just happy to be here." He says, loud and proud, that he's here to take over. He references building a legacy, growing an empire, not just surviving the league. That kind of mindset? It's not just uncommon, it's viewed as dangerous if it comes from the wrong person. Think about it. If Shedeur lives up to his potential, he's not just a Pro Bowl caliber QB. He becomes a movement, a symbol of player empowerment, legacy building, brand ownership, and independence from the traditional gatekeepers of the sport. And guess who loses in that equation? The talking heads. The insiders who rely on exclusive access. The suits in the front office who are used to shaping rookies like clay. The anonymous sources who call the shots from the shadows. Shedeur didn't just threaten to change a franchise. He threatened to shift the culture of the NFL itself. And that is what terrified them. Because once a player shows that he doesn't need the system to succeed, the system loses control. So, what happens next? They launch a preemptive strike. They paint overconfidence as arrogance. They frame his family legacy as a liability. They grab onto any negative headline, no matter how dumb, and they inflate it into a sign of danger. Let's be blunt here. If Shedeur didn't have that last name, if he wasn't a confident, outspoken black quarterback who represented something bigger than stats, this story never unravels the way it did. Trevor Lawrence can launch a brand. Baker Mayfield can be cocky in interviews. Joe Burrow can wear designer sunglasses to press conferences, and they call it swagger. But when it's Shedeur, too flashy, needs to grow up, hard to coach. Not because it's true, because it's controllable. Attack the image, plant seeds of doubt, turn off just enough executives to lower his stock in the draft. And suddenly, passing on a superstar looks like the right call. Only problem? You can't suppress exceptional forever. The truth doesn't die just because it's inconvenient. And now that footage is out, Gabriel is struggling and the Browns are sinking fast. That truth is climbing to the surface whether they like it or not. So no, this wasn't about evaluating quarterbacks. This was about gatekeeping access. It was about maintaining control. It was about a franchise and a media apparatus that couldn't stomach the idea of a rookie quarterback. They couldn't micromanage from day one. And while they were playing narrative games behind closed doors, guess what Shedeur was actually doing? He was showing up in the places that mattered most without a camera, without a script, and without a motive. Coming up next, how Shedeur led off the field during the media silence, and why everything they didn't want you to see might be the most important part of this story. While sports radio shows were trashing his image, while headlines were racking up clicks off manufactured controversies, and while NFL front offices were quietly passing on him with shaky justifications, Shedeur Sanders was out in the world. Making a difference. With no cameras, no press releases, no brand deals, just showing up where it mattered. And the craziest part? Nobody talked about it because this story didn't fit the media's script, the one written to tear him down, not lift him up. The truth? It was right there in plain sight. You just had to look in the right places. While analysts were accusing Shedeur of being distracted by his image, Wed5.com and asked Araj Tenem on the sin's day. He was walking into schools where kids didn't even have working heating systems. He was mentoring high schoolers who didn't have role models, showing up to youth coaching sessions, talking to 2-year-olds who dreamed of making it out just like he once did. Not for likes, not for a viral reel. He didn't blast it on TikTok or coordinate with a PR team. In fact, most people would never even know it happened. Because these appearances weren't about visibility. They were about responsibility, about impact. One principal at a Denver area school described it like this. Most guys show up once, big smile, photo op, maybe a little speech. Shedeur was back 3 times that month, talking to the same kids. Letting them know their future wasn't just something to daydream about, it was real, tangible, reachable. He made sure they felt it. And you know what's even more rare than raw quarterback talent? A 1-year-old prioritizing that in the middle of NFL draft prep. Think about all the other marquee names that came into the league with million-dollar endorsements and documentaries before they ever played a down. Guys like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels marketed as the next big thing, propped up by ad agencies and stylist teams. And yet, were they walking into inner-city schools unannounced? No security just to spend time with at-risk youth? Nope. They were on magazine covers and in commercials. Shedeur was in classrooms. But the media didn't want to show you that side of him. Because that version of Shedeur, the mentor, leader, mature role model, destroyed the narrative they were so committed to pushing. You can't sell character concerns if the guy is out here tangibly improving lives. And you definitely can't pretend he's immature. When civic leaders are calling him a transformational presence behind closed doors. Even off the field, it was a tale of 2 realities. Behind the scenes, Shedeur wasn't just preparing athletically, he was learning business models, sitting in on meetings, asking how team operations worked, networking with medical staff, learning the real, behind-the-curtain parts of professional football that most rookies ignore. He wasn't just studying film, he was studying the system. And for some teams, that was seen as a warning sign. Why does this rookie want so much control? Why won't he just fall in line? Simple answer: because Shedeur knows exactly what happens to players who give up control. They become silent, replaceable, forgotten the moment things go wrong. He's seen the other side of the business. He wants power, but for the right reasons. Not to dominate egos or push agendas, but to create generational impact. They hated that, because the narrative only works if you show the flashy wristwatches and the sunglasses, but not the homework. Not the late nights breaking down defensive coverage schemes. Not the boy walking into a broken classroom just to talk to 20 struggling kids who needed someone who didn't feel corporate, who felt real. That Shedeur didn't sell controversy, didn't drive clicks, didn't push the drama-forward formula sports media thrives on. So they erased him. They didn't mention the visits. They didn't find interview clips with the teachers he inspired. They didn't highlight his humility, because that version of Shedeur defeated the narrative they spent months creating. And while Dillon Gabriel was busy struggling to read nickel defenses and overthrowing short curls by 5 yards, Shedeur was already earning the respect of community leaders, veteran players, and yes, coaches. Even if those coaches felt too restricted to say it out loud. One AFC scout said it privately like this: "Kid's got leadership the media never saw, everyone talking about what he said online." Meanwhile, he was making NFL-level audibles against programs with 5-star defenses. No cameras, no noise, just ball. And you know what else they never saw? Shedeur building actual relationships in the community, not just campaigns. Not social media giveaways or logo drops. Real conversations, real time, real service. And when you look at what he was doing quietly, authentically, relentlessly, you start to realize they never had a problem with who Shedeur was. Only what he represented. A new kind of athlete. A new kind of quarterback. A new kind of leader, one who didn't need their permission. And that scared them more than anything. You ever witness something crash and burn so badly, you just can't look away? That's Dillon Gabriel's rookie season in a nutshell. And if you're a Browns fan, It doesn't feel like a car crash. It feels like your entire future is being incinerated in slow motion, live on primetime TV every single week. Let's not sugarcoat it. The Browns made a disastrous draft decision. They passed on Shedeur Sanders, a proven leader with elite tape and underrated upside. And instead, they went with the safer choice, Dillon Gabriel, the third-rounder from Oregon. Quiet, coachable, supposedly plug-and-play. The only problem? He can't play. From his very first NFL snap, Gabriel has looked out of his depth. Panicked in the pocket, off-target throws, zero chemistry with receivers. The command you'd expect from a high school backup, not the quarterback of a pro franchise. Let the numbers do the talking. QB rating, dead last among rookies. Completion rate under pressure, bottom 5 in the league. Touchdowns to turnovers, not even close to balanced. Red zone efficiency, practically non-existent. Watch the tape. You'll see confusion, late decisions, and terrified footwork. He's not just unprepared, he's completely overwhelmed. The same fans who were fed narratives about Shedeur having an attitude problem are now being forced to sit through game after game where Gabriel can't even hit a check down. Not because he's unlucky, or still adjusting, or hasn't found his rhythm yet. He's just not ready. Flat out. And here's the best part. The same media that helped sell Gabriel as the smarter pick is now turning on him hard. Cleveland media figure Derailed went nuclear after Week 5's meltdown. This offense is unwatchable. Gabriel clearly isn't the answer. We're wasting time, wasting games, wasting talent like Myles Garrett because of one bad pick. We all saw signs, we just didn't say it loudly enough. Oh, really? Because a few months ago, those same reporters were hyping Gabriel like he was Tom Brady too. They were trashing Shedeur in back-to-back headlines and podcasts. And now, when the disaster is fully public, they're pulling a complete 180. Why? Simple. Because they're trying to save face. They doubted Shedeur because it was politically safe, because the Browns themselves were feeding that angle behind closed doors. Now that the entire thing has blown up, they're in damage control mode, trashing Gabriel after the decision has already failed, so they don't look complicit in this historic misfire. But the receipts are everywhere. Podcasts, tweets, columns. They told us Gabriel was the metal-tough, drama-free guy with NFL traits. Now those same people say they had concerns all along? Miss me with that. The truth is, Gabriel was never the guy. Not even in college. He had talent, sure, but he was always inconsistent when pressured. He struggled in big games. He wasn't NFL ready from a processing standpoint. Scouts knew this. Analysts whispered it. But for some reason, when it came time to talk about it publicly, silence. Instead of asking tough questions about Gabriel, they circled back to easy shots at Shedeur. Why? Because voicing skepticism about that pick, the one being actively sold by the Browns front office, meant risking relationships, losing access, facing backlash. They chose comfort over truth. And Cleveland paid the price. Now, guys like Reuter are quoting training camp sources, saying they knew Gabriel wasn't ready, but the coaches pushed him anyway. Excuse me? If you knew this, why weren't we hearing it back then? Why did every headline in April scream about Sanders' off-the-field concerns but said nothing about Gabriel's glaring weaknesses on the field? Because let's be honest, this was never about performance. This was about narrative protection. They picked their guy. He failed. Now everyone's scrambling to cover their tracks. Meanwhile, on the field, it's a weekly nightmare. The Browns offense? Zero rhythm. Their top receiver? Publicly frustrated on the sideline. Even the defense is starting to show signs of breaking, emotionally drained from carrying the entire team through 4 quarters of nothing. And at the center of it all, Gabriel. Looking lost, outmatched, and worst of all, untouched by accountability from the people that put him there. News outlets are busy playing musical chairs with who to blame. Is it play calling? O-line? Receiver chemistry? Weather? No, it's simple. You passed on the better quarterback. And you built a PR lie to convince yourself it was the right move. Now you're stuck watching Sundays in slow-motion agony, hoping nobody remembers what you said in March. But trust me, the fans, they remember everything. And while media heads keep dancing around the real problem, there's one man who's not surprised any of this is happening. The footage was leaked. The season was tanking. And suddenly, like clockwork, the same commentators who had been shouting Shedeur Sanders down were edging quietly away from the mess they helped create. Welcome to the era of the post-narrative rewrite. You've seen it before. A story implodes, and overnight, every insider develops amnesia. One week, they're calling Shedeur too raw. The next, they swear they always believed in the kid. Yeah, right. Cleveland's sports talk world turned into a masterclass in damage control. Radio panels pretended they had mixed feelings all along. Columnists updated old digital headlines to soften their takes. A few bloggers even tried deleting tweets, as if Browns fans hadn't already screenshotted every word. The internet never forgets. And the public? They noticed everything. Clips started resurfacing of analysts dismissing Shedeur with smug certainty. He's a project, not a pro. Now those same analysts were on air saying, the Browns might have overthought that pick. I said it back in the spring. No, you didn't. Everyone heard you. You helped spin the storm that buried him. The backlash grew brutal. Comment sections filled with timestamps, receipts, side-by-side video edits exposing each flip-flop-lop in crisp HD. Fans turned detective and the evidence was merciless. Even former players chimed in. A retired Brown tweeted, "Funny how they all preaching patience now. Where was that grace when Shedeur was the story?" That post alone pulled 500,000 views in a day. The narrative gatekeepers were losing their script, one ratio at a time. Inside media circles, you could practically hear the scramble. Producers whispered about credibility damage. Podcast hosts started inviting voice of reason guests to shift blame toward the front office. We just report what the organization tells us. Exactly, that's the problem. You can't build a reputation on objective journalism if every take conveniently matches what the franchise PR team wants out there. Fans finally connected the dots, and once that bolt of awareness hits, there's no putting it back in the cloud. Meanwhile, the Browns were melting down in real time. Myles Garrett fuming on the sideline, Stefanski refusing to bench Gabriel, locker room tension so thick it practically fogged up the cameras. The team's implosion became the perfect metaphor for the collapsing credibility around it. And still, mainstream outlets tiptoed around naming the obvious culprit, hubris. They'll critique the playoff calling, the OE line, maybe whisper about locker room chemistry, but never admit the one truth hiding in plain sight. They helped build the very illusion that doomed the season. A leaked front office memo made it even juicier. One line reportedly read, "We must control external perception until Gabriel settles." Translation? They knew it might blow up. They just needed the public to stay calm long enough. It didn't. Not even close. By mid-season, ESPN panels were spinning what-if scenarios that sounded like confessionals. What if the Browns misread Shedeur's potential? What if the pre-draft narratives were exaggerated? What if the organization panicked because of outside pressure? Those aren't hypotheticals. That's guilt, dressed up as analysis. Because once the viral clips of practice hit social media, everyone finally saw what insiders had tried to bury Shedeur commanding an offense with veteran efficiency, while Gabriel flinched at basic blitz reads. No more denials. No more excuses. Each week that Gabriel struggled, the online chorus grew louder. Y'all owe that man an apology. And some did try. One Cleveland columnist wrote a rare mea culpa piece titled, "Maybe we got this one wrong." But even that apology ended with a corporate-safe paragraph about complex scouting environments and organizational alignment. In other words, we're sorry you caught us. The fans weren't buying it. They were laughing, posting side-by-side screenshots from April headlines next to November ones. April. Sanders not worth top 20 pick sources concerned about ego. November. Sanders proving experts wrong with elite mechanics and leadership. The hypocrisy wrote itself. And as that hypocrisy went viral, the story stopped being about quarterback performance. It became about trust. If they lied about this, what else have they been spinning? How many careers have been quietly redirected by the same behind-the-scenes politics? That's the uncomfortable truth spreading through sports media like wildfire. The Browns didn't just mishandle a draft, they exposed how fragile, transactional, and fear-driven the industry really is. Because when Shedeur's success was inconvenient, they minimized it. When Gabriel's failures became undeniable, they moralized it. And when the backlash exploded, they rewrote it. That's not coverage, that's choreography. The irony? The only person who hasn't said a word through all this is Shedeur himself. No public tirades, no, I told you so. Just quiet confidence and consistent work ethic letting the chaos collapse under its own weight. And that silence? It's louder than every rant the talking heads have ever shouted. Step inside Berea, and you can feel it, the tension, the exhaustion, the disbelief. Every hallway conversation starts the same way. What went wrong? And ends with silence. Players stare at tablets pretending to study film, coaches whisper about evaluating everything, and ownership hovers like storm clouds over a building that's run out of excuses. Myles Garrett? Furious. He's smashing helmets on the sideline, watching his prime wasted week after week. Veterans roll their eyes in meetings because they already know the sentence that follows every loss. Stay patient. Kevin Stefanski insists Gabriel will keep growing, even as his offense dies in public view. It's beyond denial, it's delusion. No one wants to make the one call that might save them, because admitting Gabriel isn't ready means admitting the organization got played by its own narrative. Morale has cratered. The locker room split between optimism and quiet rage. Every eye in the building waits for someone, anyone, to say the truth out loud. They bet the franchise on the wrong man. And while they study broken plays, Shedeur's already rewriting the future somewhere else, calm, prepared, patient. The Browns didn't just lose games, they lost the plot. What began as a draft strategy has mutated into a cautionary tale the entire league is dissecting in boardrooms and group chats alike. Every botched drive, every incompletion, every forced press conference smile is now Exhibit A in a study of what happens when ego overrules evidence. The city that dreamed of a savior got a scandal instead, and the franchise that ignored authenticity is drowning in spin control. But out of that wreckage rises something bigger than another sports story. Shedeur Sanders has become a mirror reflecting everything the old system fears: independent voice, earned influence, and quiet mastery. He didn't need to clap back. Reality did it for him. Now fans chant his name not just because of touchdowns or highlight reels, but because he represents the kind of athlete who can't be muted by bias or bureaucracy. Cleveland's collapse exposed the truth. The modern game isn't just about who throws the ball the farthest, it's about who owns their narrative. And this time, the narrative slipped out of the league's hands for good.